Thank you, Stephanie. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Lots of friends here tonight. Welcome. Welcome to the premiere of this one-night-only show. The Big Bang, the Buddha, and the Baby Boom. A work in progress. But aren't we all? Tonight I want to talk to you and sing to you about everything. So I guess I should get started. And I'll start at the very beginning. In the beginning was the Word. And the Word was bang. Big Bang. Before the Big Bang, there was nothing. Wasn't any space. No place to put anything. But if there was nothing, what banged? So some scientists say there was something. A dot, a point, singularity. A point much smaller than an atom. And inside that dot was everything in the universe, or at least everything necessary to create everything. And so it came to pass, saith the scientists. This is our new creation myth, you know. And so it came to pass, saith the scientists, that 15 billion years ago today, that dot exploded with a force and a light so bright it still reflects from the stars and from our eyes. And out of the explosion of that tiny dot, smaller than an atom, space came streaming, enough space to contain an entire universe. Time came streaming, enough time for a universe to be born, grow old, and die. Out of that dot came the elementary particles and the forces, and they began mixing and moving and changing, eventually creating billions of galaxies full of billions of suns and planets, and our sun and our planet, and all the forests and mountains, and people and cars and buildings, bicycles, pizza, shoes and socks. Everything you can know of and name. And it all came out of the explosion of that tiny dot, much smaller than an atom. Technically speaking, we're all 15 billion years old today. So happy birthday to all of you. Now here's an image for you. A trillionth of a second after the Big Bang, the universe was 3 feet in diameter. Now that's a universe you can get your mind around. You know? Now, one scientist says the universe is 10 billion trillion cubic light years large. Sounds about right. They used to believe that there was a gas pervading the entire universe called ether that kind of held everything in place. Now they know there's a gas pervading the entire universe, but it's helium. So actually my voice may be an octave lower than it sounds to you right now. Maybe none of us have heard our true voice yet. I read this week that the scientists have discovered the color of the cosmos. Yes, the color of the cosmos, and it is pale green. Now, it seems like there's a lot of stuff here in this universe, but there really isn't very much, because it's all made of atoms, and atoms are mostly empty space. If you put the nucleus of an atom down on the floor, blow it up millions of times until it's the size of a pea, the electron going around that nucleus will be the size of a dust mote, and it'll be a half a mile away. Mostly just empty space. But our bodies are made of atoms. And if atoms are mostly empty space, what is holding our clothes on? Not only does the emperor have no clothes, the clothes hardly have any emperor. Maybe we're all an illusion in somebody's magic act. Of course, they've broken the atom down further to more fundamental particles, the quark, lepton, and the gluon. They say everything in the universe is made of quarks, leptons, and gluons. I don't know exactly how it works, but I think the gluons are there to stick the quarks and the leptons together. And what about antimatter? They say that for every particle of matter, there's a particle of antimatter. And when they meet, they annihilate each other. I think that the discovery of antimatter proves God's ambivalence about creating the universe in the first place. You know, should I? Particle of matter, shouldn't I? Particle of antimatter. But the discovery of antimatter raises some very important new questions. Now we not only have to ask what is the matter, we have to ask what is the antimatter, and what does the antimatter have against the matter, and of course, does it matter? But even the particles aren't real, you know. They break matter open again and again, and at the very core, they find pure energy. Everything's in process. Everything is in motion. As one scientist put it, matter is just gravitationally trapped light. There's no solidity. There is no thingness. I think it's the ultimate irony that our culture, which is so thoroughly devoted to materialism, should happen at a time when our scientists prove that matter may not even exist. We are an illusion pursuing an illusion. Of course, there is the theory of everything, the superstring theory, which says that everything in the universe is made of these tiny vibrating strings, which may prove that God is a romantic after all. Now, the scientists, they don't know about the ultimate fate of the universe. We know it's still expanding. And it could expand forever into nothingness. What is known in scientific circles as a cold death, or the really big chill. But if there's enough weight in the universe, perhaps enough gravitas, then the expansion will slow down and eventually everything will begin contracting in a process known as the Big Crunch. Great name for a candy bar. The Big Crunch, and everything will fold back in on itself, perhaps into another single dot singularity. That would be called a heat death. Cold death, heat death. Looks like the universe will get you coming or going. I know the universe pays no attention to my preferences, but I really prefer the Big Crunch, and maybe then we'd all come back together again and be reborn into another Big Bang universe, and one with less friction maybe, less troubles. The Dalai Lama was once asked, is there a Big Bang in Tibetan Buddhist cosmology? He said, oh yes, but not one bang, many bangs, bang, 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 many universes. You know, the Hindus believe that their creator deity Brahma, every time he blinks his eye, a universe is destroyed. Every time he opens his eye, another universe is created. You try it for yourself sometime. But you know, it's interesting to contemplate. We are still Big Banging away here. Every time you move, every time you take a step, that is the energy of the Big Bang. Right now, inside your brain, there are millions of synapses firing, we hope. That is the energy of the Big Bang trying to understand the Big Bang. We're Big Banging away. We're Big Banging away in this human form, in this there's a dance everybody's doing, if they like it or not. Even when you're sleeping, you're doing it, you just can't stop. You may not know how to make the moves, but every single part of you is in the groove. All doing that subatomic shuffle. Your electrons are spinning around, they do it all night. Your leptons are leaping to the left and to the right. Your photons are flashing on and off, and all your antimatter is real gun stuff. It's all doing that subatomic shuffle. Well, step inside of matter, you'll find a Mad Hatter. He'll pull you out on the floor. You'll be quivering your quarks while you're dancing in the dark. Your super strings will vibrate more and more. They're all doing that subatomic shuffle. And everybody's dancing with you. Everybody's in step. The walls are dancing too, and the ceiling is hip. You may think there are things that are not alive, but look a little closer, it's a subatomic jive. It's a subatomic shuffle. Well, inside this dance, you can even find romance. Maybe get into an atom or two. And if your attraction is strong, you really get along. You'll find a charged particle coming at you. Once you do that subatomic shuffle with you, you know it's much better with two. The subatomic shuffle. Now your atoms keep moving, even after you're dead. They say your mind keeps moving too after it falls out of your head. The scientists will tell you that nothing dies. You can't stop dancing even if you try. Can't stop doing that subatomic shuffle. It's the ultimate bebop. To be or not to be bebop. The subatomic shuffle. I'm usually in bed by now. So, we're doing this dance in this human form. And we try to put a good face on it, you know. We want to believe life is beautiful, serves some higher purpose. But it's also easy to be cynical and have a dark attitude. I've been fighting it my whole life. I consider myself a cynic in recovery. There are a lot of good reasons to be cynical. It's humanity, civilization, religion, politics, fashion. But the biggest reason to be cynical are the basic facts of life. the basic, deconstructed, modernist perspective on life itself. Consider that you didn't choose to be born, or at least you don't remember choosing. Suddenly, in early childhood, you kind of wake up and say, damn, here I am, I got a life to be lived. Plus, when you're born with a very powerful survival instinct that makes you want more than anything else to stay alive. So, you didn't choose to be born, and you can't choose to die. It's like nature trapped you in this life. You don't get to choose who you're going to be. You don't get to choose the body that you will carry through this life. I don't remember any catalog of choices being offered. You know, would you like eyes in the front and back? Would you like to swim, fly, or walk as your primary means of locomotion? You don't get to choose your personality. The genetic scientists say that we're all born with a certain temperament to be aggressive or cautious or novelty-seeking, reward-dependent. And the psychologists tell us that whatever part of our personality isn't set at birth will be firmly in place in early childhood, long before we have any choice in the matter. Which brings me to the fact that we don't get to choose our parents. The dear ones who will set our lifelong neurosis for us. So we don't get to choose our body, we don't get to choose our personality. We aren't free to be ourselves, we're forced to be ourselves. And then consider that most of us will go through life and never find enough love or security to satisfy us. Consider that we have to feed this body 3 times a day, which means we have to work. Every morning when we get out of bed, we have to fight gravity. Every step we take, we have to fight gravity. We're not told exactly why we're here, or what we're supposed to be doing here. And we're given just enough consciousness to know that we do exist and that someday we will die, which we really don't want to do. As Wavy Gravy says, if you don't have a sense of humor, it's just not funny. Or as the Hasidic rabbis say, if God lived on earth, people would break out all his windows. Maybe Nietzsche put it better. He said, God's only excuse is that he doesn't exist. But I guess who are we to say it should be different, you know? Who are we to say that this universe, this life should have different conditions? We also don't get to choose the time or place that we will live. And when and where you live makes a great difference in how your life goes and also how you feel about your life. So we're big banging away here at the beginning of the 3rd millennium AD, the year 2002. That is, of course, if you go by the Christian calendar. But I don't think it's fair that we should all have to follow that calendar. Some of us are Buddhists and Jews and Muslims. I think we should have a separation of church and date. If you follow the Chinese calendar, it's almost the year 5000. And the Jews just celebrated the new year 5762. A little bit ahead. But if it's 5762, that means the Jews are having another decade of the 60s. So I think we should go out in the desert, find a burning bush and smoke it. But if a calendar is just to mark human history, then why don't we start counting from the beginning of our species, which would make this about the year 4 million AL, after Lucy. And if we're all part of this one big universe, why don't we start counting at the very beginning? Which would make this about the year 15 billion ABB, after the Big Bang. Of course, the Buddhists and the Hindus, you know, they have many, many universes. It's all cyclical. So we don't know what the hell time it is by their calendars. It's just now. That's why they invented that, you know. Be here now. You missed it. Don't worry, it'll come later. We'll have another one. But here we are, at a particular moment in history, members of particular generations, to which I would now like to pay tribute. This is supposed to resemble a news desk. Friends, Earthlings, baby boomers, all of you born in the last half of the 20th century, lend me your pierced ears. I'm here to praise our generations, certainly not to bury them. That will come soon enough, on its own. And this is Scoop talking about my generation. The children of the white middle class born in the West since the Second World War. We may be the most self-obsessed, self-indulgent group of people ever to appear on planet Earth. But it wasn't our fault. Like all generations, we were shaped by the history and cultural demands of our time. We didn't get to live through the Great Depression or the Second World War, so we can't call ourselves the greatest generation. But we have had our own struggles with enemies that are more personal and elusive. We were born into an age when the old stories were too old to have any meaning. The new ones were still too new. Born into a culture where the old gods were being doubted and where salvation kept changing its brand name. So maybe those born in the last half century could collectively be called the confused generations. And there are very good reasons for our confusion. Consider that when we were born, the physicists had just discovered the law of indeterminacy, so how could we have possibly known what we were doing? When we were born, chaos was still something that could be avoided if you were careful. In our lifetime, it turned into a law of nature. Our generations were among the first to grow up hearing about the theory of relativity, and even though most of us still don't have a clue what it means, it entered our culture as the mantra, it's all relative. And because it's all relative, then what is real and true and good is anybody's guess. The theory of relativity guided us towards the ethics of do your own thing, and to the recent and ultimate one-word summation of relativity, whatever. Recent generations grew up in a culture that was questioning its own mythology. Way back in 1966, Time magazine ran a cover story entitled, "Is God Dead?" And while the editors at Time chose not to answer that question, the very fact that it was raised didn't bode well for the deity. It seemed that even if God wasn't dead, he was at least having a midlife crisis. Meanwhile, the psychologists were busy taking apart the human psyche and showing us, in case we hadn't noticed, that our lives are not lived rationally, that we are controlled by unconscious drives and primal instincts. In a famous book about the baby boomers called Growing Up Absurd, psychologist Paul Goodman writes, quote, "It was destined that the children of affluence who were brought up without toilet training and freely masturbating would turn out to be daring, disobedient, and simple-minded." Unquote. So maybe that's why we started chanting, "We want the world and we want it now." It was because we were poorly potty trained. But To add insult to insult, in our lifetimes, the evolutionary biologists were decoding the seed molecules of life and discovering that we are related to the lowly bacteria. The Victorian era was shocked at Darwin's claim that humans are descended from apes, but we were the first generations to be told that our mama was a germ. Finally, our generations arrived at a time when technology in all of its forms, the atom bombs, the birth control pills, transistors, lasers, automobiles and airplanes, radios, movies, televisions, computers, were all driving us and flying us and seducing us far away from home toward a global village that has no center and no traditions. We grew up in a world of physical and metaphysical disruption, and some of us have since been wandering through the wreckage, trying to assemble some sanity, trying to find a mythology that fit the curve of our souls. Some of us wandered far away from our Judeo-Christian roots and superpower citizenship toward a faith in astrology or anarchist politics or a belief in nothing but the next thing. Some turned to Asian wisdom traditions such as Buddhism, which offered the solace of vast perspectives and methods to cope with the modern torrents of change. As Nietzsche said, Buddhism is a religion for the end and fatigue of civilization. In the end, the confused generations may have planted seeds that will grow to have great value in the future, seeds of a new consciousness or ecological healing. But in any case, our generations have been doing the best we can, and we deserve to be pardoned, just as Richard Nixon was pardoned by Gerald Ford. And as the Tibetan Buddhists say, drive all blames into one. So let's blame our confusion on evolution, or blame it all on Dr. Spock, or blame it all on rock and roll. And at the same time, give thanks that you lived in a time of such enormous changes, because only when cracks appear in conventional reality are we allowed to see through them, perhaps to a deeper truth. And this is Scoop reminding you to question authority, question reality, and if you don't like the news, go out and make some of your own. One of the great privileges and benefits of living in this time are the vast perspectives we have on ourselves. Cosmic, biological, historical. And looking at the historical record, we can see that many of us living here at this moment in America are enjoying a time of unprecedented freedom and abundance. You are enjoying it, aren't you? Of course, satisfaction in life is always geared to expectations. Many of us were given great expectations. So much to desire, so many things to own, so many sensual pleasures to experience, so many lifestyles and identities to choose from, so much to desire. Some of us were told, growing up, you can be anyone you want to be, go anywhere you want to go, eat anything you want to eat, own anything you want to own. Be, go, eat, own, be, you can go, you can eat, you can own. That's right. You can be anyone you want to be. Be the president of the USA, or be bent any which way. You can be a fool, be cool, be a somebody or nobody home, a contender or pretender to the throne, be a drone or the queen bee. Be a buyer, a seller, a singer or a teller of tales or a lifter of bales. Be a CEO, a CPA, a SOB, an MFA. Be a banker, a golfer, a wanker, a rolfer. You want to go as far, be a rock and roll star. Maybe you could even be a deity. Be God by God. Then you can be everyone you want to be simultaneously, because you can be, you can own, you can eat, you can go, that's right. You can own. You can own anything you want to own. Own a house or 3, maybe 20 TVs. Get a piece of the rock. Why not own a whole block? You could even own a wilderness, and I guess a mountain could be yours, or a lake, or an island. You could even own a country of your own, call it my land. Own 1,000 pair of shoes, any cure for the blues, the pills, the thrills. Don't worry about the bills. You got credit cards, checks, you can even pay in dollars. If there's anything you want, just holler. Own a classic piece of art, the original rendition or the first edition of your favorite creation. And maybe you could even buy yourself a revelation or a standing ovation. Or buy yourself a new start, a new part, a new nose, a new chin, a new heart, a new do, a new you. Because you can do, you can own, you can eat, you can go, you can do, you can own, you can eat. That's right, you can eat anything you want to eat. You are the main man, top of the food chain, man. You can eat high on the hog, eat the legs of the frog, eat the brains or the stomach or the toes of any creature that you meet. And if you don't like their color, you can dye them before you fry them. And if you don't like their texture, you can get them tenderized before you bite into their thighs. Have some fauna, some flora, come on, have some more, have some fowl, some fish, have another dish, and don't forget the cow. And how would you like that prepared in a steak or a burger or a stew or shoo? You are the main man, an American man. You can eat any cuisine on the planetary scene. Have some Javanese, some Japanese, some Indian, Armenian, fast food, hot food, raw food. You got food, so eat! And then go. That's right. You can go on vacation, just visit any nation. Take a notion, get in motion, and just go. To the mountains or the prairies or the oceans, white with foam, leave home. You can go to Walla Walla, but I don't know why you want to when you could go to Oaxaca, or get a nice palapa in Hawaii, or Fiji. Or why not go to Fuji and go diving in the reefs, or roll yourself asleep in Jamaica, or take a nice safari to Nairobi or the Gobi. Or go up the Himalaya to Shambhala, or up the Alps to Valhalla. Or go visit the Maori, or go looking for Satori in Japan, man. But if you really truly want it, you could travel to Nirvana. That's right. Escape the desires of this crazy creation. That's right. Get off the wheel of birth and death and reincarnation. Get off the wheel that keeps you always being and owning and eating and going. Being and owning and eating and going. Get off the wheel. Get off the wheel. I don't know, maybe I'm too old to be a rock and roll star. Especially if you have to stay up this late. Maybe it's because we all had so much to desire that so many of us began to desire more than anything else the end of desire. Maybe that's why so many of us went on a spiritual search. Like I did, like many of my generation, I became obsessed with studying myself. I wanted to find the source, the roots of my feelings of alienation, my identity crises. I think a lot of those roots can be traced, at least partially, in my case, back to the fact that I was born and raised the only Jewish kid in a small town in Nebraska. That's funny, huh? My spiritual path started out kind of flat. And I was an outsider from the very beginning. In order to give me my bar mitzvah lessons, my parents had to hire a traveling rabbi, a circuit rabbi, who came through town every 2 weeks on the Greyhound bus. And his name was Rabbi Falik. F-A-L-I-K. which may be one of the reasons that he didn't have his own congregation. But Rabbi Falik was teaching me this transliterated Hebrew script, just nonsense syllables to me, so that I could go through a ceremony and join a Jewish community that in my hometown didn't even exist. It's very confusing. I belonged to the junior high school choir. I remember we sang Christmas carols, and every time the song came to a line like Christ our Savior is born, I would cross my fingers to show God that I hadn't fallen for this hoax. Of course, everybody around me had, so I couldn't be sure. I did have a spiritual master as I was growing up, Alfred E. Newman. The great American teenage tantric master, the grinning guru. I studied the works of Alfred E. Newman very carefully. And no matter what kind of cartoon apocalypse was going on, you know, brutal wars, falling empires, economic crises, fashion trends, all he ever did was smile and say, "What me worry?" Of course, at the time, I didn't understand that that was a rhetorical question. So I would say, "What me worry?" and myself would answer back, "Yes, me worry." I went to college and I majored in philosophy, hoping to find some answers to this life I was living. I slogged through all the great giants of Western philosophy, all the great thinkers, Plato and Aristotle and St. Augustine and Kant and Spinoza and Descartes. You know, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Maybe I think, therefore I think I am is what he should have said. But thinking, that's all these guys ever did. Think, think, think. Finally, when I was a senior, I got to take a seminar in the existentialists, who proceeded to tell me that all previous Western philosophy was bunk and nonsense. If only I could have taken that when I was a freshman. I would have saved myself a lot of thinking, and my parents a lot of money. The existentialist said the universe was absurd and life was absurd, and that kind of sounded right to me at the time. So I read all their books. The Plague, Nausea, No Exit, The Concept of Dread, Fear and Loathing in the Sickness Unto Death. I had found my community. The philosophically depressed. Because the existentialists weren't happy. They wanted out of the thinking game. They wanted out of their minds. They wanted more than anything else just to be. As Camus wrote, "If only I was a cat among cats or a tree among trees, I would be one with the world. Instead, I have this insistence upon understanding and meaning that sets me apart from all things." Unfortunately, there was no one around to teach the existentialists how to be. No Dalai Lama to say, "Hey, Camus, just chill out and watch your breath for a while." So they became martyrs to the game of reason. Luckily, for me, I was growing up at a time when the Asian wisdom traditions were being popularized in the West by hip scholars like Alan Watts, who told me that for centuries, the Taoists and Hindus and Buddhists have also been emphasizing non-thinking and just being. And they even have developed these methods to teach you how to just be. I thought that was so cool. Maybe I should give up my plans to go to law school and go to Asia and study being instead. I thought maybe I could even get a master's degree in being. Yeah, I guess you could, a Zen master's. And at the same time, I started reading the Beatniks, and they were like these neo-romantic American existentialists They weren't just thinking about being, they were trying to be with it. Get with it. To be present for every note in the great riff of life. And the beatniks were really a literary, spiritual movement. Even though they mounted some great criticisms of our government and our society, they basically wanted to celebrate life. And they went to Asia and they studied Eastern philosophy and they studied meditation. And they began to introduce these exotic words into the hipster's lexicon, you know, dharma and karma and om and shanti. It was all so cool. So I came out to San Francisco in the late 60s. And I came because I wanted to be a beatnik, but I was too late. So I was assigned to the hippies instead. Now the hippies, oh the hippies, the flower children. We dragged Bohemia out of the shadows for a brief moment of colorful frolicking in the sun. The hippies too were mainly a spiritual movement. I mean, we had no political analysis, no 5-year plan. All we wanted was a world of peace, love, and good vibes. Is that too much to ask? Remember, we were poorly toilet trained and simple-minded. But the beatniks and the hippies were about celebrating life. And the hippies, we started throwing be-ins, communal celebrations of just being. Unfortunately, the hippies have kind of died out. Maybe because marijuana lowers the sperm count. But you know, we did help to launch the New Age spiritual revival. We did help to launch the modern environmental movement. We did help to create something new here. We all did these brave experiments with our consciousness. We helped to shorten the war in Vietnam. For all those reasons, I think that on the mall in Washington, D.C., there should be a statue of the unknown hippie. And people could come and put joints and flowers But when I got to San Francisco, also, I found the beginnings of this New Age movement. All these workshops and seminars that promised you perfect health, higher consciousness, take you to nirvana, wherever you thought you wanted to go. And I tried a lot of stuff. I did. I must admit. I had my shoulders lowered. They used to be way up here. I had my spine aligned, you know, and the crystals in the bottom of my feet broken up. I went to a New Age consciousness, some kind of consciousness seminar where they hooked me up to a biofeedback machine. I tried to balance the left and right hemispheres of my brain at some point. I went to a New Age success seminar, I really did, and it turned out to be a seminar on how to get rich and not feel guilty about it. And I tried a lot of products. You know, the great American spirit of commerce could not ignore the commerce in spirit. So for a while in my house I had a negative ion generator. I think making the air molecules very happy. For a while I went on a spirulina diet, eating algae. I don't know exactly what it was supposed to do, but it got me in touch with my inner fish. And for a couple years there, in the 70s, I wore nothing but negative heel shoes. There were shoe stores that sold nothing but shoes that sloped downward in the heel, that made you look like a little remote from everything, or like you were strutting around. What was that for? Oh, what we fell for in our search for an authentic self. Somewhere along in there, I did get more involved in Buddhist meditation and started going to see some teachers around town, and I did start gaining some relief. I didn't worry quite so much about my life. I started worrying about my next life. Will I be handsome? Will I be rich? It's always something. It's always something. Finally, in 1970, I went to Asia with a great wave of young Westerners going over to seek the esoteric teachings, to seek the gurus, basically looking for a way to get high and never have to come down. I thought I'd go and find a guru who would teach me how to merge with the cosmic oneness, and then my painful self-consciousness would disappear and the bliss would kick in, you know? I thought it would take a few months. But of course, the path is tricky and full of paradox. Because of course, we already are one with the one. So trying to become one with the one is like playing musical chairs with yourself, you know? Of course, you have to make some effort, or you will forget that you are already one with the one. But once you remember that you are there, then you aren't there. There's just the one. One is very blissful, but there's no one there to enjoy it. So as Woody Allen says, you know, those achieving oneness can now move on to two-ness. But I did find a meditation teacher in India, and I began the lifelong, or many lifelong, process of self-investigation and self-liberation. And I noticed while I was there that a lot of the people, a disproportionate number of the people around me were Jewish. And then I came back to the United States, and one of the first big meditation centers here was started by Goldstein, Cornfield, Salzberg, and Schwartz. Which sounds like a law firm, a teaching cooperative. But I began to realize that Jews and Buddhists actually are a perfect complement to each other. You take the detachment and quietude of the Buddhists, and you combine it with Jewish sentimentality and verbosity and chutzpah, and you've got a full spectrum emotional approach to life. I think we could actually be a whole new ethnic group, a whole new religion, the Buddhist people. Our mantra would be Om Shalom. Om Shalom. I got so into it, I started channeling this Buddhist guru, the Swami from Miami, who used to say things like, if you are what you eat, why be a vegetable? Why not eat people who are smarter and more good looking than you are? The Swami also said, be here now. Oops, you missed it again. I think the teachings of the Buddhist religion are best done through the use of knock-knock jokes. So the disciples come to the master, and the master says, the ultimate spiritual question, who's there? Now, if you don't get the joke, you have to be reborn over and over until you do get it. I have had some fun on the spiritual path, even though it's been hard. And I especially had fun when I got involved in Tantra. Yeah. Tantra is an ancient Asian school that says we should not turn away from the energies of this life, but we should take those energies and use them in the service of higher consciousness. And since sex is one of the most powerful energies, the tantric masters have developed some methods to harness this force. They even have a special posture called the Yab Yum. You've probably seen it on Tibetan calendars or compass. The man is seated, the woman is seated on his lap facing him. And the idea is that they coordinate their breathing, and very slowly, after focusing the energy in the pelvic areas, the lower chakras, they begin to merge the male and female energies, the yin and the yang, the yab and the yum. And they slowly move this energy up their spine, and instead of having an orgasm, they blow their minds. I've been working with this. Here's a little instruction song for you. I'll be your yab, you be my yum. Put your legs around me until we're sitting tum to tum. You know the eastern ways can be divine. You just line your chakras up with mine, and we'll do the yab yum baby till the cows come home. You be my yin, I'll be your yang. We can do that eastern thing with a little western twang. You know, everything is everything, it's been said. So honey, as long as we fell out of bed, let's just do the yab yum baby till the cows come home. Come over here, sit on my lap and let yourself go. The gurus who are in the know say it's much better when you do it slow. So I'll be your yang. You be my yin. Let's breathe along together now. Out, in, 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 out, in. Someday we will all be one, and getting there is half the fun. So let's do the yab yum baby till the cows come home. Until the cows come home. Until the cows come home. Yum. We'd be big banging away. We're big banging away at a particular place. America, the world's last great superpower, only remaining great superpower. You know, for 50 years we did that Cold War thing. United States and Soviet Union armed the world to the teeth, made enough nuclear weapons to blow up the planet 10 times over. Remember that? We won. So now we're the world's only remaining superpower. Actually, we're an empire. We don't call ourselves an empire, but that's what we are. You know, we have economic and cultural supremacy in the world. We rule. But if history has anything to teach us, it's that empires are a temporary occurrence. Historians have found that all empires have a particular life cycle that they go through, of birth, maturity, decay, very similar. And if we look back, we see empires rising and falling like waves on the ocean. Mesopotamian, Babylonian, Egyptian, Mayan, Aztec, Greek, Roman, Turkish. What are they now? Ruins for tourists to climb on and take pictures of. More recently, we had the European empires, the British, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese. Just a couple decades ago, the Brits were proud to say the sun never sets on the British Empire. Today, it's just a few chilly little islands in the North Atlantic. The sun never even rises on the British Empire. So America inherited the European colonies. We took them over with Coca-Cola and television and automobiles and dreams too rich to ever be fulfilled. But even now, at the height of our power, we see signs, classic signs of decay. Gibbon's great book, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, he says, the cause of Rome's decline lie in her bloated, overextended military, her political corruption, her public apathy and diversion, in the influx of colonial peoples into the mother country, wild swings in the economy. Sound familiar? But if decline is our fate, inevitable, then how should we face it? What should we do? In the past, all great empires have desperately tried to hold on to their power and privilege, causing great suffering for all involved in the colonies and at home. What if we could do it differently? I mean, we have the historical lessons. I have a plan. Actually, it's not my plan. I was sitting in a meditation retreat, getting bored with cosmic consciousness, and it seemed to channel itself through me. It's actually a new political philosophy called Zen socialism. Zen as in giving up. Socialism as in together. Giving up together. As the Tao Te Ching says, yield and overcome. So Zen socialism is really the next step in the dialectic of history. Only this time we stand Karl Marx on his head. Let him do a headstand for a while. And in that yoga posture, maybe realize the importance of relaxation in the coming revolution. The plan has some practical aspects. Under a Zen socialist government, the United States would go to the UN and announce to the world that we are resigning as a superpower. And from now on, we'd like to be known as just an ordinary nation. As citizens of this superpower, it would feel so good. We could let down all our heavy defenses. Have all this money to spend on healthcare, education, who knows what. We could all relax. We wouldn't have to work so hard to keep a superpower economy going. It would be wonderful. It would be wonderful. I have a plan, actually, to help our transition from superpower to ordinary nationhood. I envision a 5-year plan called the Great Leap Backward. Under the Great Leap Backward, the government would set up some temporary public works projects like the Roosevelt-era New Deal. Only this would be the New Age New Deal. What is the New Age, anyway, but planned under development? So, for instance, the government would start the Department of Meditation and Therapy and set up deprogramming centers around the country and teach hyperactive American workers how to become less productive members of a less productive society. The government would pay people by the hour just to work on themselves. We could all use the mantra, enough We've got enough stuff. Enough. We've got enough stuff. The government would set up factories with disassembly lines. Workers could take the cars apart and separate the steel out into ores and shovel it all back into the ground again. The Army Corps of Engineers take apart the dams and let the rivers run free. What a glorious national task it would be to make the world safe for nature. Maybe we could ask countries like Egypt and India and Mexico to send us like reverse Peace Corps workers. And they would teach us how to cook tasty meals of rice and beans and wash our clothes on rocks. And of course, most important of all, when and how to take the siesta. And in order to keep our currency afloat as we make the transition from superpower to ordinary nation, I envision that we would invite the rest of the world to come here and witness this historic moment, the world's first intentional decline and fall. And as we announce that we are resigning, we would say we're opening up the entire continent as one vast theme park called Formerly Great America. I have some advertising copy here. Come one and all, see history in the making at Formerly Great America. Visit the awesome architectural wonders of her towering cities, the maze of freeways, bridges, and tunnels. Visit Atlantic City and Las Vegas in the final throes of their history-making decadence. Visit the great stadia where the athletes spar for glory and riches. What a show we have for you folks. The Statue of Liberty raises her torch to the world and says, give us your curious, your bored, your tourist money yearning to buy cheap. Come to Formerly Great America, the greatest show on earth. And here's a statement, a prophecy attributed to Chief Seattle, 1855. Tribe follows tribe, and nation follows nation like the waves of the sea. It is the order of nations, and regret is useless. Your time of decay may be distant, but it will surely come. For even the white man whose God walked and talked with him as friend with friend cannot be exempt from the common destiny. We may be brothers after all. We will see. We're definitely going to have to change our way of living somewhere down the line. Hello, Earthlings. This is Scoop here to remind you that the Earth is spinning madly around on its axis, causing the creatures who live on the surface to get dizzy and bump into each other, making news. And here are some stories about life in the food chain and who's eating whom. We begin at the Environmental Protection Agency, which has set up the Amphibian Crisis Committee. And the crisis is not a plague of frogs. Instead, the frogs are disappearing and mutating, and they're not mutating into princes. Scientists believe that frogs are disappearing either due to vanishing habitat or to vanishing ozone and too many ultraviolet rays, which can be harmful to living beings, especially those without skin. But consider the consequences of disappearing frogs. If there are fewer frogs, there will be a lot more mosquitoes. If there are fewer frogs, then the snakes will have to slither into the suburbs to find new sources of food. And if there are fewer frogs, what will the French people do? As those New Age folks say, it's all connected. But let's take the deep ecology point of view, which asks us to value nature for its own sake, not just for how it affects humans. So we might try to see frogs as leading important froggy lives. They have good days and bad days, mothers, children. Remember, Froggy went a-courting. But if you can't work up any feeling for the frogs, then how about the birds? Biologists say that 2/3 of the bird species on Earth are in decline, including the canary, which isn't even in the coal mine anymore. Or perhaps you might be more concerned that the number of songbirds in the United States has decreased by 75% in the last 30 years, taking their songs with them. And the ivory-billed woodpecker considered by many to have been the largest, most spectacular bird in North America, is now extinct. Which brings us to the fact that we are now living through a major turning point in the life of our planet, one of the biggest species die-offs in biological history. The last time this much life was dying was 65 million years ago when a comet ended the age of dinosaurs. It is believed that species may now be dying at a faster rate than ever before, and the main reason seems to be the burgeoning human herds, we won't mention any names, spreading across the planet and consuming everything in their path like a plague of very large locusts. The results can be found on the endangered species list, which in the future may be read as a kind of Nuremberg indictment for crimes against non-humanity. The list reads like a who's who of the animal world. All of our favorites from the TV nature shows are endangered: the elephants and gorillas, jaguar, leopard, rhinoceros, many species of monkeys. All of the animals of our fairy tales and mythologies are facing extinction. The whales and the wolves, 12 species of deer, 10 of turtle, 15 of parrot. All the creatures of our dreams and our poetry are dying: the lions and tigers and bears, oh my, along with the giant sable antelope, the giant armadillo, the Mongolian beaver, the Mexican bobcat, the American alligator, the Jamaican boa constrictor, and the thin-spined porcupine. The endangered species list should be posted in public places, read aloud in churches and schools, updated regularly in newspapers. Every time a particular species makes the list, maybe we should put its picture on milk cartons like a missing child. Otherwise, how will we know? Every time a species is declared extinct, we should have a worldwide wake saying goodbye forever, and then put up a statue somewhere of this species that no longer exists on Earth. Maybe each of us should adopt an endangered species, one that we are fond of, see what we can do to save it from extinction. We have so little time. It's now or never. Stand up for the right to arm bears. Become lion-hearted, foxy, howl for the wolf, pray for the mantis, and ask not for whom the frog croaks. It croaks for thee. And this is Scoop Nisker saying, if you don't like the news, go out and make some of your own immediately. I know it's getting late for some of you, but stay with me here. What I just read, one of the main problems is that there are just too many of us. Just a couple hundred years ago, which is a very brief time in biological history, there was 1 billion. In my lifetime, the population of humanity has doubled from 3 billion to 6 billion. Consider that everybody's got problems. So the more people there are, the more problems there will be. Somebody should have figured that out a long time ago. I think maybe the people who wrote the Bible misinterpreted God's message. It wasn't go forth and multiply. It was go forth and add. But maybe the main problem, the big problem, is the fact of how we have come to understand ourselves in the scheme of things. For so long we've believed that we are so special, we must have come from some other realm. And then we hang out here on the earth for a while, and then we move on to some other realm. It's like we regard the earth as a training planet. See if we can make it into the big leagues, heaven or eternal life of some kind. What if we could see ourselves, experience ourselves as part of the life of this planet? There's plenty of proof of that. What if we could find our value in life as being part of this particular experiment in living and in consciousness? If we saw ourselves as part of the story of evolution, we are immediately related to everything that has ever lived. Cell-related. Not blood-related, but cell-related. We all share the same miracle molecules of DNA. The story of evolution is also very forgiving because it shows us that we're just a young species. We're just getting started. There were 100 million generations of dinosaurs. There were 10 million generations of mammals before humans came along. We've only had 20, 30,000 generations of Homo sapiens sapiens. We just got these big brains. We don't quite know how to use them yet. Of course, life has come a long way to get to here. It started way back with the single-celled organisms, the bacteria. And some of them have been around 3.5 billion years. In your mouth right now, there are more bacteria than all the human beings that have ever lived on planet Earth. Really, they have little houses in their churches, little civilizations. Some of them just celebrated their 350 millionth millennium. There's some speculation that bacteria invented humans as like a moving feedlot. Get room and board and a tour of the neighborhood. The secret of bacteria's success is that they reproduce just by dividing. They don't have to take each other out to dinner or anything. The little bacteria just gets its little packet of DNA spread evenly across its body, and then it splits. There I go, there I go. Now, it could be traumatic to think of losing half of yourself, but it also could double your chances for a happy life. Have a nice day, have a nice day. Another secret of the bacteria's success is that they aren't programmed to die naturally. They can be killed, but they aren't programmed to grow old and die. So way back in the ancient seas, the bacteria swimming around, having a nice time, and then some of them started to be attracted to each other. And they began merging and mixing their little packets of DNA, and eventually started putting their combined little packets of DNA into a separate new body. So you imagine that mama and papa microbe looking at their little baby microbe, and oh, it's so cute, look at it twitch. How they do. But the catch was that once the mama and papa microbe got their DNA into another little body, then it wasn't necessary for them to stick around forever. So they became programmed to grow old and die. So essentially life traded sex for death. Now there's a choice for you. Would you like to live forever without sex or have sex and die? I say live forever, but that, consider my age. But now we know we are related to all those microbes and bacteria. They invented sex, and they invented mobility, and they invented oxygen breathing. And life has gone from one single-celled being to a being with 100 trillion cells. That's you and me. And in order to have this complexity, we had to have both sex and death. And now, of course, we're in a whole new breed of animal. Hope you aren't offended by being called an animal. Let me assure you, all of my best friends are animals. That is the way our most eminent scientists classify us, Of course, we're in denial of our animal nature. You go to a restaurant or a cafe and they've got a sign in the window, no animals allowed. Humans walk right in. I think we should be proud to be animals, part of this great kingdom of beautifully arrayed creatures. But of course, we are a new animal, the human animal. We trace our ancestry back about 4 million years to Australopithecus, the first of our family to come down from the trees and begin hanging out on the ground. Of course, they had very poor posture at first. And about 2 to 3 million years ago, which isn't very long in biological time, along came Homo habilis, or handyman. So you know he wasn't yet Jewish. And Homo habilis started standing upright more often, and apparently liked it so much and was so successful at standing upright that we soon became Homo erectus, or upright human. And we're not talking morality here, because standing upright put the breasts and genitalia right out in front for everyone to see. No doubt, the invention of the loincloth and brassiere came soon after that. You know, the four-leggeds, they don't have to hide the sexual stuff. It's all sort of encased. But standing up was a very important moment in evolution because it's associated with a rapid increase in brain size. Now, you would think that standing up would have caused our feet to swell instead. But here's the theory. Because our hands and arms were free to begin using tools, spears and rocks, and chopsticks, we needed a bigger brain to coordinate those precise movements. Also, standing up allowed us to carry our stuff around. So about 2 million years ago, we began migrating out of Africa. Nobody knows exactly why, but probably to look for Chinese food. At the time, our brains were about half the size that they are today. Otherwise, we just would have ordered out for Chinese food. I'm sure. But Homo sapiens sapiens didn't come along until about 200,000 years ago. A blink of an eye in biological time, really. And our brains were still smaller and growing rapidly, probably because we got caught in an ice age or two and had to think hard and fast how to stay warm. Now, it would have been easier to just grow more fur, but instead we grew these big brains and learned how to make fire, and then began to sit around those fires and tell stories about ourselves. And 50,000 years ago, Cro-Magnon people had burial rituals, made masks, jewelry, obviously had come into some kind of self-consciousness and were asking the big questions like, you know, who are we and what are we doing here, and is there an afterlife, and if not, let's invent one. And only 12,000 years ago, we invented agriculture and started living in cities. Just 12,000 years ago, the blink of a blink of a blink of an eye in biological time. And all of a sudden, here we are in this modern world. We can fly around the planet and out into space. We can see to the edges of the universe and inside of matter. We know all about biological evolution and human history. In just the last couple hundred years, we've doubled the lifespan of the human being, the average human. And now all of us are called on to absorb volumes worth of information and operate fairly complicated machines. And it's a whole new world that we're dealing with. And the evolutionary biologists say we're still basically working with the brains designed for tribes of hunter-gatherers, which explains our addiction to shopping, for sure. It also helps explain our territorial and tribal ways, perhaps. It shows us also that, you know, none of us are to blame. We're all caught together in this particular moment of evolution, this particular level of consciousness. But the story of evolution is also very hopeful. Just think, 2,500 years ago, Socrates, the Buddha, Lao Tzu, Darwin, Freud, Einstein, our contemporaries, we're just beginning to understand ourselves. We're beginning to understand where we came from and who we are. We're beginning maybe to understand how to use our minds a little better, maybe even use our hearts a little better, and how to love better. The story of evolution is also filled with as much awe and wonder as any Bible. As I said before, life has gone from a single-celled being to a being with 100 trillion cells. That's you and me. And inside of each of your 100 trillion cells is a 2-yard long strand of DNA wrapped millions of times around itself. Inside each of your cells, that DNA carrying the equivalent of many, many volumes of encyclopedia, that much information gathered from all the life that's ever lived. 2 yards of DNA in each of your 100 trillion cells. If you stretch all of your personal DNA out end to end, it goes around the earth 5 million times. You're awesome. Just consider your brain. It's estimated that at this moment, in every moment, your brain processes about 11 million bits of information. And you don't even have to lift a finger, it's just doing it. Running your body, running your mind. Astounding. And then there's this mystery of consciousness, this piece of the universe that knows of itself, and knows of the universe, and knows of itself in a universe. And then just consider it's taken 15 billion years to make you. Sometimes I get depressed, I think that. It's taken 15 billion years to make me. So, the universe hasn't made me perfect yet. There's time. And at least I know that I'm not separate. The Eastern wisdom, the Western wisdom, have all given me that understanding that I am connected, that I am part of everything. And everything is everything. Remember we used to say that back in the 60s? Everything is everything? Usually in a stoned conversation. And it was a conversation stopper for sure. Once you say everything is everything, you know, where do you go from there? But it's true. Everything is everything. Is everything is everything. Is everything is everything is. That's right. Everything is subatomic particles. Everything is this, that, and the other thing. Everything is everything on some level anyway. Everything is just a play of shadow and light. And everything is everything, morning, noon, and night. Well, Plato said, we live in a cave of illusion. And Shakespeare said, he said this life is but a dream. And Einstein, he came to this conclusion. He said this matter is not what it seems. No, and everything is everything is everything is everything is everything is everything is. Everything is poetry and physics, say the scientists and the mystics. It's in space-time, it's in your mind, it's what you believe. It's the dance of Shiva, the veil of Maya, the net of Indra, the robes of the prophet. It's all made out of the same cloth. It's electrical, chemical. It's AC and DC and E equals MC squared. And MC squared equals E. E. It's quarks, leptons, it's gluons, muons, and muons for eons and eons. Through a telescope or a microscope, it's all the same by any name. The macro and the micro, the sky above, the mud below, it's all one. And there ain't nothing new under the sun. And if you're walking on that mystic path, trying to get to the one, maybe you better do your math. Cause if everything is everything, you're already done. And everything is everything is Everything is sex, drugs, rock and roll, body and soul, birth, death, and all the rest. Everything is United American Amalgamated Corporation Incorporated. Everything is a metaphor for everything else. Everything is you. You are the song. You are the universe. You are the next verse. And you're my everything is everything is everything is everything is everything is everything is everything is. Thank you all very much. Thank you all very much. Thank you all for coming. And I think that this show might have another little run, maybe sometime later in the year. And maybe you can tell your friends when you see it coming around again. And until our paths cross again, have a happy life and